What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So now that Nintendo and Microsoft have both had their own digital direct events, many people are looking towards Sony, trying to figure out when they would have their event. Well, it appears based on a new report, they could be planning two different digital events, one of which could be happening sooner than you might expect, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Nintendo and their plans for the last year or two of the Switch. As many people think that it's winding down, it looks like they are prepping a big-time re-reveal happening soon. And we'll also be talking about Call of Duty 2023, as it appears plans around this title have changed quite a bit. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Square Enix and Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered. It's a long rumored title, especially with it showing up on that NVIDIA leak list that has been, spot on basically since it dropped on the internet. Well, with a new interview getting out there, people are of course bringing this title back up because it appears the Final Fantasy Tactics team is busy with something. We can see this posted up over on Noisy Pixel, and this was actually talking with producer and director of the Theatrhythm Final Bar line, which is a collaborative title across the Final Fantasy universe, so they may have to go to directors or producers from other Final Fantasy games, right? Like Final Fantasy VII or maybe Tactics. But this is what they had to say. The Tactics team is incredibly busy at the moment. They have other things to do. They are heavily involved in another project at the moment, so we just don't have time to talk to them. Interesting. I wonder what the Tactics team would be busy with. Now, they could, of course, be working on a brand new intellectual property branding title. They could be running support on another Square Enix game. Or they could be working on Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered, and to me, that's the most likely scenario. Tactics Ogre Reborn is received very, very well, and obviously Tactics Remastered would be a very popular choice and decision to bring back in that kind of remastered format. So that's my hope right now, is that we do get that reveal, and I think could be happening this year, so keep an eye out. Also, we did have the reveal that Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games were dropping on a Nintendo Switch Online, and we'd have a bunch of other titles to look forward to in the future. They said at a later date, no given time frame exactly. And well, we can see this posted by Steven Totillo. Says, I asked Nintendo if people should expect new Game Boy Advance games each month on Nintendo Switch Online, and they said there is no set schedule for new releases, but each collection will continue to grow. And remember, originally Nintendo tried to stick to a monthly format, and it didn't really work out the best, and obviously they either ran out of games that they could schedule, or they wanted to take a step back and not have or be locked into a specific time frame month after month. So at this point, because they have so many systems, I could see them do Nintendo, Super Nintendo drops, Genesis drops, Nintendo 64 drop, and then you come back to Game Boy, then Game Boy Advance. Basically, I think they're gonna mix and match them rather than say, yes, every month you're gonna have Game Boy and Game Boy Advance stuff to look forward to. But to me, there's a lot of cool stuff they could pull from even outside of those slides they showed with things like Golden Sun, Metroid Fusion, Pokemon card game, the Oracle, Ages and Seasons. So I'm hopeful that this is something Nintendo has planned for years to come, and it is something that finds itself onto the next Nintendo platform and they continue to build on it. And when I had to include this because I think WB is gonna show up with some pretty serious numbers for Hogwarts Legacy, potentially this week through way of like a PR statement, because take a look at this. This is posted up by Benji Sales. And this is the Steam Global top sellers last week. Look at the top four. Hogwarts Legacy Digital Deluxe, Hogwarts Legacy again, then Legacy Digital Deluxe again. Now you might be wondering, how are there 4 spots taken up by this game? Well, apparently Steam counts the pre-orders and like the initial sale when it goes live on the storefront differently because they're different SKUs. This is also tracked by revenue, by the way. So the fact that it's above the Steam Deck that starts at $400, we saw it crossing the 800,000 concurrent player mark on Steam. I believe WB is going to show up sometime this week with a number in the neighborhood of about 10 million sold for Hogwarts Legacy. So, successful boycott, I guess. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with PlayStation and the potential for their own digital events that are coming up in the next, say, about 4 months or so. And this came way of Jeff Grubb, who gotta be feeling pretty good. Well, maybe. I mean, he was proven right with the Metroid Prime Remaster stuff, which, by the way, we're gonna talk a little bit more on that one and some proof showing that Jeff Grubb, yeah, he was certainly right on its existence and the possibility that it could even have been announced and released last year. But he started to talk about Sony because naturally people are looking around, realizing, okay, we have Xbox news this year, we have Nintendo news. When do we get the PlayStation news? Well, we can see this post up. It was over on Twitter. Basically, Noble did kind of transcribe and summarize what Jeff Grubb said on his podcast, so make sure you check that out. It'll be linked down in the sources as well. Said there should be a smaller, low-key state of play in the next 4 weeks, and Sony saved some announcements for a big boy showcase, which should happen before E3. Now, Jeff Grubb did quote tweet this and say, I see people keep saying March for the state of play, but I think it's more likely to happen before the end of February. And I would agree. I think like probably that last full week of February, somewhere in there, maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday. And so 2 different events, and it makes sense. The more low-key state of play that would be coming up in the next 2 weeks or so, week and a half, I believe that's going to be 15 or 20 minutes, all right? And I think there's going to be a bunch of VR2 stuff in there, and that might be why it's more of a low-key one, but something I think they could drop in there, and I believe it would get people pretty excited, is a Resident Evil 4 remake demo. I think if that's there, because they have the marketing with Capcom, and we've seen this happen actually a couple times in the state of play with Resident Evil, that I think would be really exciting for a lot of people, and they would see that as a successful state of play. The PSVR 2 stuff seems obvious since this would happen right after the PSVR 2 launch, and Sony is still in this mode where they're trying to convince people that you should pick it up, and obviously you need to pick it up with games. So I think in the first year of the PSVR 2's release, Sony has just come out firing game after game after game, and yes, that does include Half-Life Alyx. I think they got to figure out that deal with Valve to get that on the PlayStation platform with their new headset. But their big showcase is, I'm sure, what a lot of people are going to be asking about, because that's where you would see more of their big-time reveals, and it seems like that would probably fit in well enough in the second half or just late May, so ahead of June when you're gonna have a lot of talk and advertisements and stuff around not only E3, but we know Microsoft and Nintendo are technically away from E3. They're not necessarily part of it with all of the branding, but Microsoft will still hold their event, we believe, on the Sunday of that E3 week. You also have Summer Games Fest, so Sony most likely will try to probably space it out by a couple of weeks and I think find their way into May. And what do they show there? Well, they have studios all over the place currently working through second party and first party, of course. Spider-Man 2 seems to be the obvious thing to really showcase since that's going to be their big holiday push. But then you look around, they could go to Deviation, they could show off their title that seems like it would be maybe not necessarily a Call of Duty competitor, but like a live service shooter maybe. You would most likely see Haven talk about their next title. Maybe they show off Twisted Metal here. Last of Us with that online multiplayer. There's, again, a lot of stuff they can pick and choose to showcase here, but if it is a showcase as opposed to a state of play, you would expect a lot of first-party stuff to be shown in full here, and that's where it can get pretty exciting. So at this time, thinking a state of play that keep expectations low for in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, and then look towards that showcase closer to E3 in maybe late May as them going all out to set things up for the PS5 over the next year or two, we'll say. Next up, let's talk about Metroid Prime, which it's a great time right now to be a fan of this series, isn't it? We got the Metroid Prime Remastered, dropped out of nowhere from that Direct, and reviews started coming in for this title. It's going to be one of the highest rated games of the year. I know it's a remaster, but I mean, take a look. Come on. Metroid Prime Remastered, 96 on Metacritic. That is only on 14 critic reviews, and the fact that it shadow dropped, it's going to take time for more and more reviews to come in, but it actually went from a 95 to a 94, now up to a 96, 9.1 user score, and I mean, Metroid Prime in general is one of the best games ever made, so it makes sense coming in at this $40 mark with a ton of work being put into it by Retro Studios that, yeah, would achieve this high of a mark. I think, by the way, for the Game Awards, we are now in a position, because, I mean, I came off a Dead Space remake and then went into Hogwarts Legacy, then went into Metroid Prime Remaster. I'm going between these remasters and remakes. Resident Evil 4 is coming up, and I think there's a few others as well, so might be time to have that remaster remake category in the Game Awards at the end of the year. But Metroid Prime Remastered, I mentioned that Jeff Grubb was on to something there when he said that it could have been announced and even released last year, because take a look at this here. According to a German rating organization, Metroid Prime Remastered was classified in July 2021, 18 months before release, which to me means that Nintendo sat on this game for almost a year and a half. I mean, we've talked about the idea of the Metroid Prime trilogy for a while with them being remasters. Then it morphed into Retro Studios doing a pretty serious job on Metroid Prime bordering on remake. And then it went to, well, Nintendo's doing something with this. Well, it looks like, as I figured, once that remaster got announced, the Nintendo would be on the path to Metroid Prime 4. With Metroid Prime Remastered launching, they also launched their Metroid Portal website that has all kinds of information for the Metroid universe, and it just seems like they're building up to when they do announce Metroid Prime 4. And I mean, we see with Game Boy Advance and Game Boy, they're going to be able to make the Switch the Metroid system. I mean, you're going to have everything there, basically, right? You won't have the 3DS remake necessarily, Samus Returns, but you have like the original there, you can play that. And the fact that you'll have all this Metroid stuff on there, as well as, I believe, 2 and 3 getting the more remaster treatment, not like the, oh wow, this is almost a remake treatment. It's gonna be pretty cool to have all of that. But Metroid Prime 4, I think, is setting up for that E3 reveal. There was a thread that was made on Reddit, people were sending it to me last night, that seemed to talk about Nintendo almost canceling Metroid Prime 4 or looking at the remastered reception. None of that's correct. At this time, Metroid Prime Remastered being released signals that Metroid Prime 4 is just about ready to be revealed. All right, so that's what they've been holding on the Metroid Prime Remastered for. At least my belief is that as soon as they got to a position where they were comfortable with 4, it's time to start the big marketing push. And part of that is shadow dropping Metroid Prime Remastered, which has worked incredibly well as a marketing tool. So Metroid Prime fans out there, get excited, because if you were blown away by the Metroid Prime Remastered, get ready, because I think Prime 4 is really going to impress people when it gets shown off. Now, will it be at E3? Will it be later on in the year during their fall direct? It is hard to say, because I think this could also end up being a cross-generation title, and Retro is able to showcase what their next platform that we assume will be more, we hope will be more powerful than the current Switch, can do. But exciting stuff right now for Metroid Prime fans. Next up, let's talk about Call of Duty 2023, which the rumors and reports around this game have shifted quite a bit, and that's because I think it's very fluid in development right now, and plans for Activision Blizzard and what they would like to do with this title, well, originally started out as more paid downloadable content that would extend the story for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Well, now it appears it is becoming more of a standalone game that might even just release at retail as such. We can see this post up over on Insider Gaming, saying previous reports have suggested that the game will be premium DLC for Modern Warfare 2, and although that appears to have been true at one point, Insider Gaming understands that the project changed direction to become a full premium standalone release planned for 2023. They say the game will be heavily connected to Modern Warfare series, and if recent Call of Duty titles are to go by though, expect a lot of remastered maps for multiplayer. Now from there, Charlie Intel, they say the report corroborates what we've heard in that there was a shift from doing just a 2-year expansion to a full premium release for 2023. And then Jason Schreier also commented on the situation, says Treyarch's game was planned for 2023. Early last year, they decided to delay Treyarch's game to 2024 and fill in the blanks with more Modern Warfare stuff from Sledgehammer, and at some point, they decided to frame it as a full release. And this is interesting in the idea of they would potentially release it as a full premium standalone release, and it would have its own multiplayer, whereas I guess before the plan was to just add more maps for multiplayer on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and then add campaign, which if you play Modern Warfare 2 now when you go into it, it's almost like a little hub that also goes to things like DMZ, goes to Warzone 2.0, and it kind of felt like they might build on top of that as plans were. So yeah, it does seem like they were thinking that way, but I guess they figure, hey, it's Call of Duty, we could sell another 20 to 30 million, no problem. And the fact that they potentially could be targeting PS4 and Xbox One all over again, that would be a massive install size for them to target just across the board. Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series, PC, PS4, PS4 Pro, PS, you got the picture there. So yeah, it seems, we'll see how it turns out, but they would be targeting Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 something. I don't know, maybe just some sort of subheading to differentiate it from the current Modern Warfare 2. Maybe they just call it something completely different, but it still kind of has that branding around it. A lot of questions here, but it does seem that Call of Duty is going to be a standalone release for the end of this year. So we'll see what we get from Activision when they're ready to talk, I guess, around E3 time, as they like to, and then make the big marketing push to the holidays. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft, Sony situation. We, of course, know Microsoft is working to buy Activision Blizzard for about $69 billion. And part of this is Sony trying to run interference throughout the entire process to make it really difficult. But now Microsoft is pushing back a bit with Discovery as they are working to subpoena different documents from Sony. And it sounds like Microsoft is doing that tactic where they're asking for a ridiculous amount of stuff. So much so that it kind of feels like relationships between Microsoft, Sony, and even Activision are being broken completely. You can see this posted up by Eurogamer, where they say, in a motion filed to the court, Sony issued strong words in response. Microsoft's demand for performance reviews for SIE's leadership is obvious harassment. Even in employment cases, courts require a specific showing of relevance before requiring production of personnel files. This is not an employment case. And from there, again, strong wording. Sony just accusing Microsoft of harassment through the courts. We have Bobby Kotick, who's kind of made the rounds a bit on different financial shows like Fox and all this, and he's kind of made mention that Sony just doesn't want to talk to either of them anymore, and that kind of shocked a lot of people. He said, more interesting is Kotick's allegation that not only has Sony stopped talking to Microsoft, but that it has also stop talking to him. And the reason that's so interesting is because we know Sony has relied heavily on Call of Duty from Activision since the PS4 generation. That was a big move by Sony, was to lock up marketing rights, DLC, maps, campaign stuff, all these different extra benefits for their platform. For that entire generation now into the PS5, it's worked very, very well because it's been mentioned that really Sony's most successful revenue generator time and time again on PlayStation has been Call of Duty. That's where a lot of people go to play Call of Duty. And yeah, if they lost marketing rights, that would damage them quite a bit. Not as much as if Call of Duty just disappeared and Microsoft said, no, this is now exclusive to Game Pass. But having the Xbox logo next to Call of Duty as opposed to the PlayStation logo would still have people maybe moving to Xbox more than you'd expect. And the fact that Activision and PlayStation wouldn't be talking does bring up the idea that maybe that relationship is just completely split at this point, and in the future, the marketing deals would go away for Sony. But something tells me that money would probably fix that kind of bad blood. It really comes down to if Microsoft does end up acquiring Activision Blizzard, they would probably stop the marketing deal eventually after Sony's current contracts run up. So it's just more and more details keep coming out from this, and that one was just really surprising to a lot of people because Sony looks really, really frustrated and annoyed, although they kind of got involved themselves. So again, it's just a big back and forth between lawyers and contradicting statements and all of this. I'm just kind of ready for it to be done, but some of the information coming out is very telling. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, when do you think Sony's next PlayStation State of Play or Showcase will happen? Then 52% say March. Only 8% say February, when I was thinking there might be one maybe. I do believe in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, somewhere in there, right? So end of February, beginning of March, there will be a State of Play. And I mean, if you take a look at the calendar, it could actually be the day after PSVR 2 comes out, maybe in that week, like the 23rd. So could even be on like the 28th the following week, but then you get into March. So I'm thinking though, in the next couple of weeks, yes, we will have a State of Play that probably will have a large focus on PSVR 2, but hey, always that chance for that Resident Evil 4 remake demo. I'm crossing my fingers. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Project saying, the most annoying part to me about it isn't the price hike, but the game they decided to inflate the cost of. It's a sequel built in the same engine for the same console. There's no way it was more expensive to produce than Breath of the Wild, and yet they want to raise the cost anyway. So the thing with Tears of the Kingdom is it has been in development for quite a while. We don't really know the cost of the first Breath of the Wild in terms of the budget and the marketing versus this one. But I do believe it's comparable, I'll say that, for Tears of the Kingdom, just based on its time in development and seemingly the amount of workforce put behind this game. But Nintendo is looking at this and saying, I guess, okay, it's on a 32GB cartridge. Again, I don't think that's a great reason. but also they know that this is one of the most compelling games that they've ever released on the Switch, especially based on how Breath of the Wild able to achieve an over 100% attach rate. In their mind, if they're going to take a shot at 70, this is probably the one to do it with. I just thought they would have shown up with just a better showing for it, that everyone going, okay, that I get it now why this is 70. It's this massive, crazy experience that Nintendo's put together. Instead, it was like a minute and a half. People are still kind of confused about what is going on in the game. So I think they will have their own Nintendo Direct based solely on this game ahead of release. And maybe that is where they blow the lid off of this entire game and get everyone looking at it like, okay, I feel like this game is worth more than Breath of the Wild, but we'll see. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether Sony and their potential for a state of play and a showcase later on in the year. What games would you like to see announced at these different events? And then also, what about Nintendo and the success of Metroid Prime Remastered? Does this title get you excited for the potential what Retro Studios could deliver with Metroid Prime 4? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.